This podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Tall Man Equipment, where they pride themselves on equipping their customers with the tools they need to get the job done right. They are dedicated to set the standard for quality, convenience, and reliability. At Tall Man, your opinion is important to them. Rate and review any product or tool you've used on their new website at tallmanequipment.com. Line 11 Clothing Company, making apparel for our first responders with a positive message to patriots that you can be proud of. A proceed of the cost goes to helping our foundation ignite the fire for father engagement. Give them a follow at Line 11 Clothing on Instagram. And last but not least, Monzingo Knives. Each knife is created with craftsmanship that only a tradesman could provide. Find them on Instagram at Monzingo Knives and get your American-made Monzingo knife today. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Show Up Dad. This podcast is created for hardworking fathers. At the Show Up Dad, we recognize that fathers providing for their children is certainly important. But when men truly understand their unique role and gain the knowledge and skills to be great fathers, they can transform and impact future generations. Today's guest is Jim Morris. Jim was a high school science teacher and coach in West Texas who miraculously made it to the major leagues at the age of 35. His life story made cinematic history with the heartwarming and unforgettable Disney movie, The Rookie, starring Dennis Quaid. Jim pitched 2 seasons for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, reaching speeds at 102 miles per hour, and chose to retire to raise his children. Jim and his wife, Shawna, have raised 5 children and live near San Antonio. Since 2000, Jim has been highly sought after motivational speaker, traveling the world, inspiring audiences to follow their dreams and never give up. Welcome to the Show Up, brother.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jim. Dude, your story is amazing. I was watching that movie the other day with my children, The Rookie, and it was so inspiring. I was just so stoked to have you come on here and be a guest with us and just talk to our listeners and just have you open up and share your story with us. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But like always, Jim, can you give our listeners a background story about you and tell us a little bit who you are, where you came from, etc.?
Yeah, military brat. Born in San Diego. Moved constantly as a kid. My father was physically and verbally abusive. Number one, I was never supposed to play sports outside. I had asthma. Within 24 hours, I had pneumonia. But sports was what identified me as a kid. And everywhere we would move, I would show up where kids were, show them I could throw the ball hard, and I had a team full of friends. Never had to say a word. And so as we moved, sports became me, because in between those white lines, I could be the kid I was supposed to be, if for only a few hours at a time. And baseball was my love, man. We lived in California when Vida Blue was a pitcher, and I wanted to pitch just like him. There's only one problem. I'm not Vida Blue. And Vida Blue is Vida Blue. And I threw one ball over the backstop, and it was time for Jim Morris to be Jim Morris. But I love sports because I think it coincides with life. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to do something to accomplish something. And the more quality people you have around you, that's the quality you're going to have. Mm-hmm. And so if you surround yourself with the best, you're going to be your best. And if everybody had the same talents, this would be a pretty boring world. And so in baseball, you got a pitcher, catcher, you got infielders, you got outfielders. Everybody's got their specific job. But within that, you have teamwork. Mm-hmm. And everybody has to do that job to make the team win. And so for me, baseball was my love and my passion. So for 15 years, I watched my parents argue, throw, hit, and curse, and do things you promised never to do. And at 15, they did me the biggest favor they never knew they did. They sent me to my grandparents' house in Brownwood. And so I finished school at Brownwood High School. Our football coach had won 7 state championships, 400 wins as a high school coach. And he taught us it doesn't matter how big, fast, or strong you are. If you have a better plan and you have more heart, you're going to win. And we won a state championship with that attitude. We weren't the biggest, the fastest, or the strongest, but we won because we knew what the other team was going to do before they did it. And, you know, the team that we beat for the state championship, their running back averaged 250 yards a game that year until he got to us and he had 56. And now he's in the NFL Hall of Fame. and we held him in check. So I'm like, hey, that's cool. It was Thurman Thomas.
Oh, wow.
And, the next year he won state, but I didn't care. I'd graduated, so he can win all he wants. But it was just fun because we knew what he was going to do before he did it. And by far the most challenging game we had, because they were just a great bunch of athletes, man. And we were these, for lack of a better term, these little rednecks hauling hay in the summer and just getting in shape. And so sports for me was an identity early in my life. And I know that's not right now because I'm 58 and I get it. But back then that helped me be the kid I was supposed to be. And if I couldn't play the game, I wanted to coach the game. And I ended up in Big Lake. And I got a group of kids who everybody was down on. We're not supposed to win, coach. People come through here on their way to somewhere else. And so I did the best I could with these kids. Baseball is my love. I've met Hank Aaron. I got to hang out with Hank Aaron. And I've got to see all these ball players through the years. But history is not what these kids needed at that time. They didn't need to know that we've been through wars, recessions, depressions, civil unrest with baseball. They needed to know that this is our family and people are going to come on our field, our home, and try to beat us here. And we're not going to allow that. And so it was just a different mindset with these kids because they had heard another coach knock them. And, they're not even going to graduate from high school. They'll be here forever. And their parents are losers. The kids are losers. They'll never amount to anything. That's not what I believe. Mm-hmm. And I believe if you breathe life into someone, then you're giving them a chance to succeed. Even if their love is not your love, just showing them you can dream and you can dream big and go after them. So the first season, without learning much about baseball, we won 10 games. We were 10-0 at home. Mm-hmm. And the second season, I had 63 kids come out from my baseball team. So now, barely able to field a varsity. I've got a varsity, a JV, and 2 freshman teams my second year there. We had hired a new coach. I was on my way to practice in 1999, where the movie opens up. And he put his finger in my chest and he goes, you might be a great baseball coach, but you're always going to come in last to people like me because you're too nice. I know how to step on people to get to be where I want to be. 2 of my kids are right around the corner and they heard it. In 90 seconds, this guy destroyed 2 years of work.
Wow.
And so as the movie opens up right after the nuns, we get run ruled 15-1 and 15-0. And what came out of that was a challenge. And I like to push the people that I coach. And I always push myself as an athlete. And I know that when you put those boundaries up and you go, how far can we go with the talent that we have? And what can we do to improve ourselves in one particular area every single day? We're going to make ourselves better. What is that going to be? And so I stood on home plate as I sent my kids down the left field line. I just said, God, how can I show these kids I love them? How can I push them without breaking them? How can I get these kids in this little bitty West Texas town to dream when everybody else is down on them? And the answer was so quick and so simple. It was go down there and teach them what your grandparents taught you. So out of that, the bet was born. Mm-hmm. And if we win a district championship, coach, you try out. Now here's the deal. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm 35. People are getting out of baseball right now. Mm-hmm. I've already tried to play minor league ball. I had 6 surgeries in 5.5 years. I gained 60 pounds. I look like a baseball scout, not a baseball player. And oh yeah, at 28, I had a surgery in which the doctor said, you'll never, ever pitch again, physically impossible. Can't be done. Mm-hmm. And so as I'm talking to the kids and they're challenging me, they're like, coach, why are you telling us to chase our dreams if you're not willing to do it yourself? And I said, well, you're 18, you need to shut up. And they start giggling, I start giggling. And I said, what do you have in mind? Well, if we win, you try out. And I said, just because you win a few games, I'm not going to go embarrass myself for nothing. What if we win a district championship, which these kids have never been a part of in baseball? If we win a district championship, you try out. So for another 20 minutes, I argued about every reason I should never step back on a professional mound. And after 20 minutes, I did what every parent in this country does. I caved in. If you win, I'll find a tryout somewhere. In the back of my mind, I'm going, you are old and fat, and you have now become the punchline. But if it got the kids to play better, I can embarrass myself for a few minutes. I just want to draw out of them what I knew was there, but they hadn't realized it yet. And so we can we can correct people every step of the way and say, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. And all they're going to hear is not. But if we tell someone that they can and they will, then they will start believing that they can and they will go out and be successful. And they'll put in the time to get better. And they'll want to help their teammates out. So they'll do whatever it takes, extra ground balls, extra fly balls, extra mound sessions, extra hitting practice. And I was in it with these kids the whole way. Now, when we made the bet, they couldn't hit me at all. I'd throw batting practice, they'd whiff. By the end of the season, after we'd made the bet, I can't get high school kids out. We're fixing to win a district championship, and I'm going, they're going to win, and I can't get high school kids out. That is more embarrassing than I thought. And then we get down by 2 runs in a championship game. They score 6. We hold the other team to 0. We win. Best sight I've ever seen. They're hugging each other. They're hugging their parents. They're hugging the trophy. And I'm like, they're smiling. They're celebrating an accomplishment that not even they thought they could accomplish. And here they are. Mm-hmm. And right away, as I go back and start the bus, I'm looking out these kids celebrate. And everything my grandparents taught me for the 3 years I was in high school came back. It's not about me, it's about we. What can we do to make it better? What can we do to improve our situation? What can we do to be successful? What can we do to dream? And it was all right there in front of me. And then I forgot about the bet. And so as I'm watching these kids celebrate, my second baseman, Whack, comes and hops up on the top step of the bus. He's my team clown. I had tears in my eyes because I'm so happy for these kids. And he sees me and he starts giggling, right? I'm like, shut up. And he giggles at me. And then he pulls a ball from out behind his back head. Reagan County Owls, District 128 champs, 1999. Everybody signed it. I cry. He hugs me around the neck and he goes, we did our part. Now it's your turn. I'm like, oh no, I forgot about that. And 3 months after the bet, they won a district championship. 3 months after that, I'm in the big leagues, all because of a group of kids. I never, ever would have gone back to baseball. But because the relationship that we forged, it was trust. Mm-hmm. And we were going to push each other to be better. We weren't going to tell each other what we were doing wrong. How can we get better? And those kids bought in. And so the whole thing was amazing. And the fact that I got a second chance because of a group of teenagers kind of dispels the fact that the youth are terrible, the youth are horrible, they're not going to amount to anything. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can. And we can rise to the occasion or we can lower ourselves to the occasion, but that choice is ours. Mm-hmm. I wanted these kids to rise to the occasion. And in return, they wanted me to rise to the occasion. And I did, and I'll forever be grateful. Mm.
Man, what an amazing story, Jim. And I appreciate you, just sharing that with our audience. And I agree with you 100% when you say speaking that life into our children. I get this all the time, Jim, when I talk to other men, other fathers, other linemen, with the youth, and they all say the same thing. Oh, this generation, they're lazy. They didn't have to do this. They didn't have to do that. They don't want to work, but I see, and I agree with what you say. We need to be able to speak life into them because obviously somewhere, some way along their path of life, there is a disconnection to where they never received that, to where they didn't have that life breathed into them, to where now their identity is surrounded, but I'm not good enough. You'll never be good enough. Yeah. Right. So I think we need to change that narrative the way you did by giving them a hand up, not a handout. And by being able to tell them, hey, man, come on, let's do this. We got this. We got this together. I like how you mentioned we. There's no I in team, right? Yeah. So with that we're going to show them to grow them, correct?
Exactly.
And that's amazing, brother. I mean, I think if more fathers, more men, more husbands, more leaders, more mentors would do that, I think we'd start changing this narrative of this next generation being lazy and not wanting to work.
Yeah, I think a few bad apples give everybody a bad name. Mm-hmm. But who people are now is not who they will be.
Yes.
And our job is to improve that slot and not degrade it any and not tell people, oh yeah, you are a loser and you're never going to amount to anything. because that sticks with you.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you're being successful, those negative thoughts are going to come into your head. And our job is to breathe life into our future. And I remember walking into my grandparents' house. This was my father's parents,
Mm-hmm.
a father who was physically and verbally abusive, who held on to my little brother one day as he looks down at me and goes, "This is the one we wanted. We never wanted you." As I got older, I never wanted another kid to have to hear that. You had a child, and that's not good enough for you. Whatever lot in life you're living, you're doing it wrong. Because if all you can do is make excuses for something before it ever gets there, you're already lost. And so when I walk into my grandparents' house, I'm like, this is my dad's parents. They're going to be just like him.
Mm-hmm.
When I walked in, I had 2 rules in my grandparents' house. If you do it, own it. Own it, live up to it, move on. And number 2, tell the truth, because you don't have to remember what you said when you tell the truth, because the truth is the truth. Those were my grandparents' rules for a 15-year-old who could have fallen off the rails. And they were like, not on our watch.
Wow. No, and those are amazing. It's amazing to see the contrast between your grandparents and then your father, the way he treated you. Like, where do you think the disconnection was there for him?
I don't know. He had a brother. His brother is like the perfect combination of my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like him, talks like him. Just incredible. My father has always hated the world. He always hated himself.
Mm.
And I think the insecurity that he had, he wanted to try to get rid of it. And so he put it out on everybody else to try to get rid of it,
Mm-hmm.
and try to make them feel less than they were and make himself feel better. We're not ever going to accomplish anything that way, except we're not going to have very many friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of times shame, whenever we feel shamed, as men, we tend to act out in anger. I know I did. Whenever I feel shame or whatever, it's almost like you don't want that spotlight on you and the things that you've done. So you start pointing the finger and blaming, well, what about you? You did this, you did this. And it's just to get that light off ourselves, because right at that moment, that bright light, like being on stage, is shining on you and it's making you uncomfortable,
Yeah.
But I like what you said, Jim, about relationships and how you had that relationship with the kids you coached, and it was forged through that adversity. I think that's a major thing right now. I have some great relationships with a lot of men that I've gone through certain things with, even just talking on podcasts and just finding something relational with each other. You know what I mean? Like, I was a victim of a violent crime. Then I talked to another father and we can relate with each other. You know what I mean? I think that's important. And I think that's why our stories, like your story and my story, are important, because we can get out here on this platform, talk about it, talk like men, and then it'll transcend and help other people that are going through the same exact thing. You know what I mean? But
Yeah. We need men to be fathers is what we need.
absolutely. Absolutely. Talk about drawing the best out of people. Okay. You talked about how you got to teach them that they can believe in themselves, and drawing out that thing in them. How do you recognize something great in a child or even in another person?
I think by the expectations that you set. And I think if you expect a good performance, and that's what you're going to get. If you expect a bad performance, you're going to get that. I think teaching kids to think positively and wanting them to grow and become better themselves, because my grandfather said this one thing, it's always stuck with me. He goes, your dream right now may not be the dream you end up loving the most. You may find another dream on your way to the one you thought you wanted, and this one's way better. And just, he had those little things all the time. He would talk to me and built me up. He didn't tear me down. And, one of the things he said, he goes, you're not going to be able to throw the ball hard forever. What are you going to do then? And it wasn't so much the things that he said at that time from 15 to 18. It was the way he lived, because we can give good lip service to whoever, but kids are going to watch the behavior. And if it doesn't match the words, they're not going to listen to you. But if you build them up and you show them you're going to live the right way and you're living by what you teach, they will buy in. And I did it with my grandparents. Those kids did it with me. And now my kids are doing it, hopefully, with my granddaughters. And our job is to build up, not tear down. We've had enough tearing down in this country.
No, amen. Those are words to live by for sure. I see that even with my daughter when she calls me out on something that I told her to do. You know, she's my mirror image. I mean, same exact hard-headed, never give up, type of mentality. And she'll challenge me. She'll be like, "Okay, Dad, why are you eating in your room? You already said there's no eating." And it's like, do what I say, not what I do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's awesome to have them be able to keep you accountable.
Exactly.
But that
and I
means
think one of the
go
things
ahead,
my
sorry.
grandparents talked about was surround yourself with the best people.
Mm,
Because if you surround yourself with people who are talented and smart, then you're going to want to be that way too. If you hang out with someone who wants to drag you down and go, "Hey, we don't need to go to practice today. Hey, we don't need to do our homework. Let's go do this and let's just go do something else." They're taking you away from your focus. And when you get away from your focus, you lose sight of what your dreams are. And our jobs as adults, as fathers, is to breathe life in, not take it away.
mm-hmm. No, absolutely. My father used to always tell me, "You are who you hang with." And
Exactly.
or another one of the things he would always tell me is, "Show me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are." And it's absolutely true. Even with my daughter, I have to teach her how to see through the lines, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of times people will come to you with ill will intentions and, like you talked, lip service.
Mhm.
So I have to teach her how to see their fruit, right? What is the fruit in their life? If they're talking this and saying this stuff, but their life isn't in alignment with what they're saying,
Yeah.
you'll know that person, you know? And that's one of the things I'm trying to really, really exercise with her. That way she can read between the lines with people's intentions and stuff like that. I think it's important, you know. Another thing too with her is I'm allowing her to make these decisions. Okay. I'll ask her three things. I'll be like, "Okay, so Nakota, how does this person make you feel? Does this person have the best interest for you? And if so, what have they shown you? And it gets them really to think. And I think that as fathers, we need to ask those important questions and be able to frame them in a way that they could understand. So
Yeah.
that's truly helpful.
My grandfather had this saying every day I left his house. He had a menswear store in Brownwood, Texas, population 20,000, but people came in from all over the country to buy suits from him, not because so much the quality of the clothes, but because the quality of the man himself.
Mm,
And he goes, "I'm not selling menswear, I'm selling me. And if I get people to buy into me, then they're going to be more receptive to other things." And so every day I left his house to go to school, he would go, "Remember who you are and whose you are." And that just stuck with me. And he goes, "Because you can't hide from whose you are." And so if you want people watching you, and remember, everybody's watching nowadays, everybody's got a camera,
mm,
they don't matter. The good Lord matters, and
mm.
he sees all. And do we fail? Do we falter? Absolutely. But do we dust ourselves off and get after it again and try to be better? Yes, every time.
No, you're absolutely right. Whose you are, know whose you are, and you'll know who you are. I think that helps with men's identities too these days. So many times we associate who we are with our job or our title. At the end of the day, that doesn't even matter. What matters is what they think of you as far as what you portray yourself to be, your character, right? Let
Yeah.
that shine through. And what is character? Character is doing the right thing when no one's looking. That's what I teach my children, right?
Taking the high road.
Taking the high road. We'll even do that with our hikes. They'll be like, oh, it's easier this way. I was like, no, let's take the high road and we'll go through the crazy little route there, everything's training.
Yeah. The rookie is not my identity. That's just something I did. I am a child of God. And my job is to bring other people closer to that. And I don't have to beat them over the head with it. I'm not a religious nut. But I can say one thing, do another, and then everything is wiped out just by that. But if I say something and then I do what I'm saying, people want to live up to that. They don't want to live down to that. And so you're bringing people with you. Surround yourself with the best to be your best, because those people want to see you succeed for no other reason than they want to see somebody else go further than what they thought they could. That was my grandparents teaching to me.
And I like that. I like that they actually instilled those values in you. I remember being asked one time by a good friend of mine, a foreman, and he's like, "Oh, these Christians, he's a lineman too, and he's like, these Christians, he's like, oh, they're nothing but hypocrites and saying we're gonna go to hell and blah blah blah." You know what I mean? And I looked at him. I was like, "Well, I'm a believer." And he's like, "You're a believer?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, are you going to tell me I'm going to hell and throw a Bible at me?" I was like, "Absolutely not. Why would I do that? I'm no different than you," I told him. Yeah. I was like, "The only difference is I know that I need help. And I finally found a place where I can go to receive that help, because I've tried everything. I've tried drugs. I've tried alcohol. I've tried pornography. I've tried failed relationships, fighting, everything possibly, and for me, it was turning to Jesus Christ and allowing him to take that burden off of me, and he just looked at me and I was like, "That's it." And he's like, "That's it." And I was like, "Yeah, that's it." I was like, "There's no difference between me and you. I just know where I'm going at the end of the day." And he just kind of smirked,
Here's the deal that I tell people too, if they want to get ugly about me being a Christian or having faith. If I'm wrong, I'll just be in the ground and rot.
Yeah.
But if I'm right, that's what we're all striving for. And I'll tell you how I got there. My grandfather, who was this big, strong, healthy man, came into contact with a chemical during World War II. And it took a long time to get to him. And it started with a trip in the store one day. And he hopped up and acted like nothing was wrong. But over the next 6 months, all these specialists, cane walker, wheelchair, and I watched the healthy, strong, 6'3", 260-pound man be limited to a wheelchair. Now, he led people, a community, and a state on his shoulders when he was healthy. I watched the same man do that from a wheelchair. And when you can do that, you're living the right way. Do you have something awful? Absolutely. Is it fair? I don't know what fair is. It just is what it is. But he dealt with that disease. It was ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. He dealt with that disease with character, grace, and dignity. He never complained. And it was amazing. He and I are sitting in the kitchen one night, and he's hooked up to oxygen. He's in a wheelchair. He's stooped over. He's got clay in his left hand, trying to keep some movement in it. I'm 18. I got my whole life in front of me. And I look at him and I think of the ugliest thing I can say, because I think this is not fair. You're telling me about God and everything God can do. Well, why is God letting such a good man suffer all this misery? And so I thought of the ugliest thing I could throw at my grandfather. And when I came back with, I'll throw his faith at him. I said, why did God do this to you? Why didn't he give this disease to somebody who deserved it? And at 18, you got like a list of people who you think deserve it.
Yeah.
And my grandfather took in some oxygen. He looked at me the best he could and said, son, I've worked my whole life to get to where I'm going. Where are you headed? Never complained. And he still was teaching me in that position, probably the most important lessons I would ever learn. God is God. We got free will for a reason. And our mistakes are our mistakes, and we own them. And whatever happens, God's not making it right and God's not making it wrong. It's just life. But it's a lot better with God in your life.
Yeah, and that's what I always tell a lot of people too. It's like, man, God didn't do this. That wasn't his will for you. And the promise in the Bible is that he's going to see you through it, because life happens. I had a past guest on here. Um, and one of the things his mom used to tell him, if you lose your job, you know, life happens. And he'd go, shit. You know what I mean? That's what his mom would say. He's an awesome guy. And anyhow, that holds true. It's stuff's going to happen to you, and we can't just be pointing the blame on this person did this or going into that victim mentality that your grandfather didn't show at all. I mean, there is no victim mentality there.
No.
I see that a lot today. I see people always wanting to put blame on other people and carry that victim mentality. And I think that hinders you a lot. I mean, that stops you from growing. It stops you from becoming who you're meant to become. And that's something we need to avoid at all costs.
Absolutely. It makes us, everything's about excuses
Mm-hmm.
and not blessings. And once we start making excuses, we'll excuse everything. And, oh, I screwed up. Well, it's just me. That's just how it is. No, I want to be better. I want to get better. I want to do the right thing. Am I going to make mistakes? Yeah. One perfect person ever walked the planet, and it's not us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be the best I can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to be the best Einstein. Einstein was Einstein. I have to be the best Jim Morris I can be, the grandson of Alice and Ernest Morris, the husband of Shawna, the father of 5 kids, because they're looking at me to see how I'm going to live my life. And if I make excuses, they will too.
Yes, they do. They watch you every step of the way. I think now today, right? Labels. Everybody has a label for everything. And that's going back to that victim mentality. Oh, my son can't pay attention. Okay, well, help him to focus. Take away that device. Get in there and help him read. Little boys need structure. I've even seen that with my kids. I mean, I was rambunctious back in the day, and if it would have been today's society, they would have put me on Ritalin, and they would have put me hyper active deficit disorder, whatever it is, right? And I think right now people are quick to put labels on people, and you got to be careful with what you identify with. When you're saying, okay, I have a learning disability, I have this, I have that you're receiving that death, you're receiving that label that's being put on you. Now that's becoming a part of your identity. And we got to be careful what we say and what we receive as people, especially as fathers. We have a tremendous amount of influence over our families, over the trajectory of their lives, everything. And when we're speaking death, not life, like we spoke about, we're actually causing damage to our children and the way they think about themselves.
We're teaching them to be smaller than what God wants them to be.
Mm-hmm. Wow. No, I like that. We do. We limit them. We put that cap on them. One of the things I always tell my children is I don't want to tell them they can be anything, right? Because let's face it, there's certain things that you're just not going to be able to do. Okay. But what I want to do is I want to identify their strengths, what they're good at, what their passions at, and I want to build in that direction.
Yeah.
One of the things that I heard, which I thought was absolutely amazing, is find yourself what you love, right? What you are passionate about in life. And the way to do that is what upsets you. Like if there's something that really upsets you or something that motivates you, that's your passion. Okay. And when you identify that, run with it and try to learn how to make money off of it or go into a field where you can make a living off of it. Right. And that's what I try to teach my kids, as fathers.
I know this. I never thought I was going to be smart enough to go to school and get a degree.
Mm-hmm.
My counselor told me, you better play baseball because you're too stupid to go to college. Well, then they label you.
Mhm.
So then you believe it. And then
Mhm.
you go to college and you find out, no, wait a minute, I'm not dumb at all. And that got me a degree.
Mhm.
Getting that degree allowed me to work with kids. Working with kids got me back to my dream that I'd wanted since I was 5. Doing that let somebody play me in a movie who has made over 100 movies now and led me into a career of speaking, which I never, ever saw myself doing. I'm not going to talk in front of people. I can't even talk to a classroom full of kids. That's why I write everything on the board. And now here I am speaking, to 10 people or 25,000 people. It doesn't matter. It's made me comfortable. The bigger the crowd, the more I like it because I like a challenge.
Mhm.
You like a challenge. We all like challenges. Why not challenge our kids? They're not going to die if you take that cell phone away. Fact is, they're probably going to get in less trouble.
Mm.
Take away the distractions so we can focus on the dreams.
Wow, I've never heard that like that. I know I knew about the distractions, stuff like that, but that is amazing. Take away the distractions so they can focus on their dreams. Yeah, that is something I need to really start implementing with my with my kids as well, because it's true. I mean, everything's right there at their fingertips. I mean, your kids acting up, what do? You suffice them by giving them a device. Here you go. Here you go. And that's I had a past guest talk about how these devices are actually a form of isolation because now these kids and even adults, they don't have to have a relationship anymore because why? They're so infused with this device. It's taking away all relational aspects, right? Because now they're so super focused. They can't even lift their head up for 1 second to see what's even happening around them. And life is passing them by. And how depressing is that? He talked about how that is the new isolation of America is these devices. And you see it when you go into a restaurant, you see father, mother, children, all on a device. No one's talking. That never used to happen back in the day. You used to have a roundtable discussion, which I still implement in my household. And, you'd see people talking, communicating, seeing how their day went and stuff like that. And you don't really see that anymore. And I think we need to get back to those old school, which I call roots,
Yeah. We're fake living. We're living vicariously through what we think other people are doing. But
Mhm.
all they're putting out there is what they want out there. They're not putting out there everything. It
Yeah.
is just it's a vicious circle. And I heard from a person who's very knowledgeable in this that
Mhm.
by the time my grandkids grow up, they'll be so used to this stuff that it's not going to be like that anymore. They'll just be like, oh, that's just another tool for me to use. That's not something to lose myself in.
And the only way to change it too, Jim, is to start instilling these values that your grandparents taught you, right? Passing them on, passing them on. And these are things that over the course of time, hopefully we can change that next generation. I'm a big believer in raising the next generation. That's our slogan on Instagram and stuff like that. And we just didn't get where we're at today last night. This is a slow burn, right? It's subtle compromises that we have done as fathers. Because and I blame fathers. I'm hard on fathers because I'm a father and I know what I've done, and you know, I'm man enough to say, hey man, I made some mistakes, and I need to correct this stuff because I don't want my kids growing up that way. And I think if more fathers are involved and aware of these things, future generations, it's going to get back to being the way it should be, right? If we continue forward,
Right.
Now, I wanted to ask you, Jim. You talked about hanging out with Hank Aaron. How was that, man?
It was a childhood dream
Mhm.
because I got to watch him when he was with the Milwaukee Braves. They
Mhm.
came into Boston. I lived in Connecticut at the time. My all-star team got to go to Fenway and watch Hank Aaron play. He signed a baseball for us.
Mhm.
I sandlotted Hank Aaron's baseball. You live in Connecticut, it snows, you run out of baseballs, you grab the next one. It was Hank Aaron's ball. So when the movie comes out, Russell Athletics is an advertiser in The Rookie. And so I got to ring the closing bell with Hank Aaron, and I'm telling him this story. And in my eyes, I'm looking at this man who broke all sorts of barriers and went out every single day and played to the best of his ability, going through things that we will never understand because we weren't in his shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it at the highest level. He did it the right way, and he didn't complain. That is a character right there.
Mm-hmm.
That is someone we need to be like. And so I'm telling him all this. I'm like, I sandlotted your ball. And he just starts laughing. He slaps me on the back. He goes, that is one of the best stories I've ever heard. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, but you're Hank Aaron. Dude, you're a home run king. And just, it was great meeting someone that I idolized as a kid because I liked the way he went about his business every day. He didn't show us how not to live. He showed us how to live.
Mm. And I think that's what we need, our kids need, and even us, the inner child. We need those heroes. Yeah. And now we live in a day and age where and I know people are probably going to get upset, but we're idolizing drug dealers and all these other bad characters, right? We're putting them up on this pedestal. Well, what about Hank Aaron? I mean, here's a man who didn't compromise. Yeah. Even when he had this great adversity thrown against him, he was a African-American, in a league where that was frowned upon. And here we have him not compromising, just showing up to work. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's what he did. He showed up to work. And that is someone who should be monumentalized and looked up as a hero because he did it right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we need more of those in our society. It's crazy how everything's just upside down right now, Jim. It really is.
It is. Totally backwards.
Good is bad and bad is good. And, all these different things, all these agendas that are going on. And
now, my grandfather taught me this important lesson. And one day this lady comes into the store and she's got on overalls and boots. It's obvious she has a pig farm because of the smell of the boots. All the men my grandfather's age who were the salesmen didn't want to wait on her. He sees this from his office. He gets up, he walks out, he treats her like she should be treated. Mm-hmm. And before she left the store, she bought 15 suits for every male in her family, paid in cash. And when he walked back by me, he said, don't ever judge anybody by the cover. He goes, you got to get to know the heart. He goes, there are two types of people, good and bad. And that's it. Doesn't matter color, doesn't matter what language. There are people who want to make the world better, and there are people who want to make the world worse. Hang out with the people who want to make the world better.
I like that. Yeah, hang out with the people that want to make the world better and help you become that person too. I've read where they said, if you hang around with 5 successful people, you're going to be that 6th person who's successful, right? And just that contrast of hanging out with the wrong crowd versus the crowd that has your best interest, in mind. It's so important, and fathers, if you're listening, please pay attention to who your children are hanging out with. As you can tell through the stories that Jim has shared with us and my stories, it's so important to know what's going on in the lives of your kids. Don't fall asleep at the wheel. You guys are so important to them in their development, and they're looking at you. So not only just tell them, like Jim said, we need to live it as well.
Kids are a gift. They're not an excuse. Our job is to bring our kids up in a way that makes the Lord joyful. And we're not doing that. We're falling asleep at the wheel. I'm as guilty as anybody else. I've made mistakes. I'll own them. My job is to get up, dust myself off, and do it better next time. And one of the things that I do with my kids, even though they're all grown now, if I make a mistake and I do something wrong, I own it. And I tell my kids, I said, that was not right. I should not have done that. I should not have said that. I need to do better. And then go about doing it better. And they can see that. And they're like, well, if he can own his mistakes, then I can own mine. There are a lot of things that we go through in life. And if we had more time to talk, Dave, I could tell you a lot. I've been in rehab at 51, turning 52. The doctors told me my Parkinson's was going to get worse. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. So they've got me on pain pills. That's not working. So I start drinking because I'm a doctor. You know, I've squeezed 4 years of school into 12. I know what I'm doing. I ended up in rehab. And for the first time in my life at 51, I turned 52 while I was there, I got to concentrate on that little Jimmy who had so much stuff done to him that was so wrong when he was a kid, who wasn't able to recognize the good people that I had had in my life that wanted to make me better. And now I got to take all that into account. And so I got to clear the floor, and God and I got down, we got dirty. And he said, you know what? I got more stuff for you to do. Let's get busy. And Dave, I'll tell you this, I left there, got a group of ladies at my church who pray for me. I call them my girls. I don't want to be called ma'am. They're all 50 to 90. They're my girls. But they've prayed for my wife and I through all of this, 70 some odd surgeries. And I don't have Parkinson's anymore. And a lot of people go, how could you say you had Parkinson's? Well, I was diagnosed by the main specialist in the world who told me that I had CTE-induced Parkinson's. So I had Parkinson's. I had 2 brain surgeries, one to have the brain stimulator put in, and then one to have it taken out. And if God can make good use of me, he can make good use of all of us, because none of us are perfect.
Man, thank you for sharing that, Jim. I appreciate you opening up. It takes a courageous man to be able to talk about, you know, addictions and whatnot. And once again, man, just thank you for coming on. This is such a great interview with you, and just you being just so transparent and being able to share your knowledge to our audience. I highly appreciate you, and I look forward to talking to you more.
I appreciate that. And thank you for having me on. And you know what? One person at a time, one step closer to God.
Amen. I agree. Thank you, Jim.
Yes, sir.